a lot of students seem to be able to come to Oxy and say, wow, you know, we're really diverse, and everything is so fair and equal here, and there's just so many different colors. And to me, the school has some very conservative underlying tones, some which people don't see, and some which people don't want to see. Do you want the West Coast to go over here?
Whitfield has had some backhanded compliments that cause him to wonder about some of the attitudes on campus.
I appreciate any compliments that I'm issued, but I've heard comments from other people who have told me, you know, so-and-so said, you know, wow, you know, there's this guy in my class, you know, he's really smart, you know, this black guy, he can really, you know, he's really smart. I just can't believe it. And I've heard that before. I've heard that, and it's a little shocking. I'm not surprised, but it's just like, well, I guess we haven't moved past the Stone Ages yet, and maybe you need to see more people who can articulate and impress you. Not to mention the amount of people who seem to think that, white students who seem to think that many of the blacks and Latinos here are here because of affirmative action. And that if there was no affirmative action, that many of us wouldn't be here. And that we don't have much to offer academically.
It's really interesting being like a person of color on campus, and sometimes people like won't approach you or won't talk to you like in any setting besides like academics, because they just don't know how to like deal with you.
Like, let's say we'd be at a party dancing and stuff like that, having a good time, and you look around, there's like a bunch of like white people staring at you, and you're just like, what is this? Like, we're not in a zoo. Like,
being a person who's, you know, brown, who obviously doesn't fit, you know, the white stereotypical female participant in art history, it's kind of an interesting experience because we're learning about something where in the media, in print, in photos and stories and pictures, I am the other thing that is being spoken about.
And, you know, I'm not like trying to say like, oh, we should all be colorblind and that kind of thing, but you know,
there's like a kind of like exotification of people of color, I feel like, definitely, especially at like parties and stuff like that.
But at the same time, there's a sense of clashing with speaking about my experience and speaking about the otherness that I still experience in class. So it's a little bit of a kind of balance between how I should feel and how I should then approach it.
It's very interesting. I didn't really know that geology was such like a white male-dominated field until I started taking a geology class this semester with mostly geology majors. And it was a little bit disappointing, to say the least, because there's not much like representation of like people of color, women of color, even women in like the field of geology. I don't know, it makes me feel like a little bit more pulled back. I like don't really want to like share in class as much, and it makes me kind of like doubt if I made the right decision of geology, because I love geology and I'm really, really passionate about it, but it's hard being in a place where like you're the only person and nobody really understands you.
My freshman year, I was living in Chilcott, and I was in a room at the time. There was some smoking going on, and it wasn't my room. I was just in the room, and there was about 6 or 7 people in the room, and campus police came to the room, started knocking. Everybody started freaking out, and so eventually they got into the room. Everybody had to give everyone's IDs, you know what I mean? You know how it goes. And so the owner of the room, the person who was living there, he got put on academic probation, which is reasonable for being in his room. And everyone else that was in the room at the time just got put on censure, except for me. I was the only other person that got put on academic or disciplinary probation as well as the resident of the room. I don't know why. And I wrote an appeal letter. I saw my academic advisor, talked to him about it, and the school didn't even read my appeal letter because they said that it didn't meet their requirements. So that was another time I definitely feel like my identity definitely played a role in that case as well.
I never questioned my ability and my intelligence until I came to Oxy. And interestingly, I felt like that would just be something that I would deal with students, but I've experienced different instances with different professors, and where they tell me that they could tell that English isn't my first language, that Spanish was, and I just want to tell them, what's your point?
I grew up around like people who spoke mainly Spanish and who do like occupy like jobs, working class jobs. So
in like the classroom space, at that time with that specific professor, there were only 2 Latinas in one classroom, myself and another one, and that same professor confused us all the time. And so that student and I went to see that professor in office hours, and we told that professor that we wanted to establish from the beginning of the semester that I was Karen, my other friend was obviously another person, and that professor told us that we always sit together, so that's why he confuses us. And then we let him know that that was a problem, because there were white students that sat together, there were black students that sat together, there were Asian students that sat together, and he never confused them. But we never did anything afterwards.
well, of course I like had to choose poly. I really like value like seeing people that like look like me, and what was like sort of interesting is that like people I like identified with happened to be like the cleaning staff.
So my problem with Pauley right now is that like Pauley is no longer valued as a multicultural hall, which is a big issue, because talking to people who've lived there for 4 years or people who lived there in the past, you can see that not only do the students that live in Pauley, but also the administration just do not care about multiculturalism and creating that space for students. And I feel like that's really problematic, because there should be no reason why in my first week of going to college I can walk down Pauley Hall and students are telling me, wait, this is a multicultural hall? Like, what's that? Like, that should never happen. Then why are you bringing these students here? Why are you irresponsibly using a demographic to boost yourself if you're not going to take care of these students?
While there are a lot of spaces for, people of color, there are not a lot of spaces for queer people of color.
Issues of, race and ethnicity, and really exploring that's solely what I have to explore. That's all what people want to talk about, and get institutional change around that. But it's like, wow, so now I have to like neglect my queerness. Now I have to like neglect my gender fluidity.
All I want to do is literally talk about how hard it is, because no one else gets it. No one else gets, like, everyone can be down with like how hard it is to be a person of color, but like people don't understand how hard it is to be a person of color who's not straight.
Because my queerness works in conjunction with my race, which works in conjunction with my class, and they're all working together. So if like one part of that wheel has to be neglected, then like the entire wheel itself can't operate fully, and I can't really show who I truly am.
When it comes to sexuality, it's a completely different conversation, where there's a faux sense of, yeah, like I understand it's hard, but there's no I don't think there's a desire to really talk about the real shit.
Or if I'm on the other hand, if I'm like organizing around issues of like queerness, all of a sudden it just like takes this like white shift, and I'm like, whoa, like that's not, I can't, I can't like, I'm pretty sure I'm brown, and I need both.
I think one of the most common things that happens is I have a partner, and going to parties and very like casual social settings, people think it's okay to take it upon themselves to ask us to like kiss for them or to like dance with them. Like, I don't know. No, thank you. I don't know.
We're all students here. We manage full-time schedules, we're leaders of organizations, of clubs. We have our own personal commitments, and, we're people at the same time. We have personal lives with friends, families, and so on and so forth. So it's been a real challenge to sort of balance how do I manage like my personal, my academic, and then also the activism side, right?
There have been different students that not directly have told me, but have told others who then afterwards have told me that they feel like I'm too sensitive and too nitpicky and take things too personally when it's issues that when we talk about like race and when we talk about privilege, it's issues that obviously are things that I'm confronted with every day, and it's things that those students aren't confronted with.
So really, like, activism for me has never been a choice. It's been so much of a requirement for me to change the conditions and the environments for me to feel comfortable to learn and to grow and to exist even.
Just today, someone told me that students of color are here to contribute to white students' experiences. And although I think everyone has a lot to learn from everyone else, that's not what I'm here for.
And by that mean, I think it's like built into this system of oppression and privilege to have students who are from marginalized backgrounds have to dedicate so much time, so much effort towards activism work, because I think as much as I dedicate myself to activism on campus and to everything like that, I also know that like my grades suffer a little bit, at least from it, right? My personal life suffers.
I never voiced my opinion my first and my second year, and it was because of the instances that happened in my first semester. But this year I made an effort to not be silent and to actually voice my opinions. And it's only since I made that decision is when students have begun to tell me, my peers have begun to tell me that I'm too sensitive and too nitpicky.
But I don't know, I just think like, okay, I've got into the school the same way that other people have gone into school. Like, we all had to apply here, so I deserve to be here as much as anybody else.